going to hear about Dawn of a New Age, a digital exploration of Don Quixote. And we have Melissa Garr and Maria Morgan as our presenters. And I think we should probably start recording now. Okay, perfect. So Marina Morgan is the metadata librarian at the Rue Library at Florida Southern College. She has a Master's of Information Sciences from the University of Toronto, Canada, a postmaster's certificate in Library and Information Science, Web Programming and Information Architecture pathway from the San Jose State University, and is currently enrolled in the User Experience Design Certificate at Cornell University. She is actively involved in scholarly research and contributed to the library profession through presentations at various national and international conferences. She is also active professionally in several state and national library associations, committees, and interest groups. We also have Melissa Garr, who is an associate professor of Spanish at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida. She earned her PhD in Spanish literature at Purdue University and her MA in Spanish through the University of Northern Iowa. Recent publications include Austronity and Genre, Semiotic Subversions in the Crying of Lot 49, and Death in the Compass, and Power, Privilege Testimony, Bakhtin's Legacy in Discourses of Privilege in I, Rigoberta Menchú, and Passion di Historia. She is currently conducting digital humanities research on the pedagogy of digital exhibits, and her other research areas include 20th and 21st century peninsular literature, genre fiction, and examining literature through the lens of Mikhail Bakhtin. So we're really looking forward to hearing about Dawn of a New Age, a digital exploration of Don Quixote, and I'm going to pass it over to you guys.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to share.
Yep, I'm stopping now.
Sounds good. Let me know if you see it.
Looks good.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Helen and Mia, for the introductions. We're very happy to be here today to present. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And thank you for, the attendees here today on this sunny Friday afternoon. So a little bit about what we're gonna talk today. I'm just gonna have a brief introduction and, tell you about us. The idea of this project and the planning behind it, the project life cycle, why we decided on Omeka as the tool for our project. Then Dr. Garr will show you a little bit the Omeka site. And then we're gonna return and talk about the pedagogical challenges and as well as technical challenges and future plans. So a little bit about us. Florida Southern College is located in Lakeland and is the oldest private college in Florida. It was founded in Orlando in 1883 as South Florida Institute. The U.S. News and World Report's guide, Best Colleges, ranks Florida Southern in the top 10 in 3 categories in its 2021 edition. FSC is ranked number 9 among the best regional universities in the South, number 6 in its best undergraduate teaching in the South category, and among the top 20 best value universities in the South. Also, for the 11th consecutive year, Florida Southern College has been recognized in the Princeton Review's prestigious guide, The Best 386 Colleges, for its campus beauty and exceptional architectural heritage. Florida Southern is the only institution in Florida to be included in the top 20 of the 2021 edition Most Beautiful Campus, in part due to the largest collection of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, which were designated a National Historic Landmark in 2012. Now, Florida Southern College has 149 full-time faculty and over 3,500 students. It offers 70+ undergraduate programs and 11 graduate programs. Melissa will talk about other interesting things at the college.
Well, to give you a little bit of a sense of how I'm a Spanish professor, so how the Modern Languages program fits into our college kind of institutional profile. We have 100 Spanish majors and minors. There's a language requirement only for students with a Bachelor of Arts degree. So we are a very small program. We have 2 full-time faculty members and 2 adjuncts in the Spanish major. It's the only language major that we offer, but it's a very robust program. And we do see a lot of students from Florida Southern because it does have an arts focus. And of course, students from all kinds of disciplines seek us out for language learning because a lot of them, particularly education students, for example, often work in Polk County, which is where we're located. We also have a very robust study abroad program. Florida Southern has a program called Junior Journey, where students, after they've completed 4 semesters of study, they get money towards a program. We offer over 40 different Junior Journey programs. Most of them are free. And my program offers a 4-week study abroad in Alicante, and we take between 40 and 60 students for 4 weeks every year. And we also offer many other study abroad opportunities like year-long ones. We have in the 2019-2020 school year, even considering COVID, we had 438 students participating in Junior Journey. So that to give you a sense of how many students are taking advantage of the Junior Journey program. And so the reason that I felt that digital collection and exhibit creation is particularly beneficial to our campus and our program is because it's a very small campus, and so that kind of gives it a very collaborative nature. Our program is very small. We know all of our students. We know all of the faculty. We work very closely together. And so it fits well into our program, and also the interdisciplinary potentials of our campus. This particular project was between Marina and the library and my students, but there's a lot of potential here to do interdisciplinary connections with other faculty members as well. So the idea that we had, well, the idea that I had, the original project for this particular Don Quixote, it's an undergraduate seminar at the 4,000 level, was that students track different textual elements of Don Quixote and they would write logs about them. So when I taught this previously, the students had looked at archaic language and intertextuality, and each pair of students would track that. They would take notes throughout the text anytime those things happened, and then write logs about them every week about whether there were any changes that they were noticing, or so it's basically data collection. They also had to collect, we looked at Mikhail Bakhtin's definition of reaccentuation and adaptation. I had the students create a definition of their own for reaccentuation as Bakhtin defines it. And then they collected reaccentuations of that week's readings and made blog posts about them. We got all kinds of things from, episodes of Quantum Leap to, operas. And of course, Don Quixote's been adapted and reaccentuated in many, many ways. There were a lot that actually surprised me too. Like they had seen some street festival where someone brought out like a windmill, or it was really, really neat that they had done this. And so this is the previous iteration of what I had done. But I really decided that I wanted to use a dissemination and collaboration tool that would be more effective at meeting my student learning outcomes related to language and textual analysis. And part of the reason for that change was also that following our accreditation a couple of years ago, we had a quality enhancement plan for undergraduate research and creative activity. So I felt that this would fit in better with the dissemination piece of our QEP as we're moving forward with accreditation stuff. And I also, so when I was kind of mulling out over the idea of creating digital exhibits, right? I had been looking into finding scholarly articles, the scholarship of teaching and learning about creating the benefits or best practices about creating exhibits and using the exhibit creation process as a pedagogical tool. And I didn't really find much of anything. Most of the scholarly research that's available is about using digital exhibits made by others as comprehensible input in foreign language terms, right? I didn't find much about the value of creating exhibits and then actual creation for other people as a pedagogical experience in and of itself for both the language development and also to meet the learning and outcomes that I have for literature, including textual analysis and synthesis of information that's gained from comprehensible input. And so I had gone to Marina and I said, listen, I want to do a digital exhibit. I want my students to create a digital exhibit or a digital archive of some kind. And she said, oh, I have the perfect perfect tool for you. So Marina, do you want to talk a little bit about your?
Yeah. So again, as a librarian, here we were so small that I have, a lot of responsibilities, and one of them is also I'm the modern languages liaison. I have several instruction sessions every semester, and I'm available for research appointments with the Spanish students as well. So as Dr. Garr said, the idea of the project came when we were exploring the ways of applying new technology to pedagogy in the humanities. So, as the metadata working with, several digital collections and digital exhibits, Omeka was the very first tool I thought of, as being a great choice to use in Dr. Garr's classroom as a creative learning tool for students. And yeah.
So for the planning piece, I knew that I wanted to continue doing the paired component of the project, with tracking the textual elements that I had the students looking at over the course of the book. And part of the reason is because the students at Florida Southern take 3 semesters of language classes before going into the upper levels. So some of the students who entered that class to read Don Quixote had only had 3 or 4 semesters of Spanish previously. And so I have a very wide range of student proficiencies in those classes. And so this sort of gives the students a purpose for reading. They're tracking just one thing at a time the whole way through. They get the information from the other students, but it also helps them focus and helps them learn how to use the text and things to understand. But I also wanted that re-accentuation piece that the students had done individual blog posts. So for that, I decided to create that as a whole class collaboration component. So that was going to be done by the whole group together. There were 11 students in the class. And then each pair of students was going to also have a page that was going to track a textual element. I left the parameters really broad in terms of the outcome, partly because I'm not familiar with the tool. I wasn't familiar with the tool myself at the time. So I didn't really know what they could do with it. So I kind of didn't tell them what I wanted in the sense of what I wanted it to look like at the end. I was very, I told them it was a very exploratory process. So I wanted the sky was the limit. I wanted to see what they could do. And honestly, that was a really good sandbox for them to play in, because I think they came up with some things that I might not have thought of if I had made the parameters very rigid for this first project. So I'm really glad that we left them very broad. We decided to, we focused our training primarily on the software of Omeka and not as much on the textual parts of the project or how to deal with the content aspects of the project, because that was much more related to their ongoing work in the class. The training, we focused specifically on how to use the tool, and also we spent a lot of time doing copyright information and attributions and stuff to make sure that the students were putting out a public project that wouldn't violate copyright law in any way.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of the project lifecycle, and then we're going to go and I'm going to talk about each component in part. So in terms of the project lifecycle, there were many stages that took place. For example, before setting up the Omeka account, the students had a textual reading, and after the project, parameters were set. Students had to collect the data from the text itself. So I think that took, a little bit of time, at the beginning of the semester. But once, we overview the project, then as a group collectively, or actually mainly the students, decided on the particular theme of the site. Then we had to name the site. And again, the students came with this amazing name. We take no credit for the title of the website. It's their choice. Afterwards, I installed all the plugins, and as Dr. Garr will show you later, we kept it simple, not overly complicated, because it was our first time using it in the classroom, and we just wanted to make sure everything goes well. Afterwards, the students were encouraged to upload the images, creating items, collections, and then they were instructed to tell a story of the textual element and why it was important. So in a nutshell, this is the life cycle of the project. So let's dive in. Omeka. So what is Omeka? Omeka is a web publishing platform for sharing digital collections and creating media-rich online exhibits. It's flexible and has some, somewhat easy user interface once you get to know the backend. It has several plugins and various themes that you can choose from. As this was the first time that Omeka was used in a classroom, we went with a hosted plan. So there's omeka.org and omeka.net, and we decided to use a hosted site, to be easier for us in terms of managing that technology. Students and others interested in using Omeka can opt for a free trial plan. But instead, I opted for the Plus plan, which is the one that it's not free, but it's not too overly expensive. And it offers 2 sites. So I wanted to have one for, a test bed for me, and then the one using for the classroom. 20 plugins, 8 themes, and it costed only $35 a year. Omeka is not new to me. Before coming to Florida Southern College, I worked with Omeka at an academic institution in Canada, creating several digital collection and exhibits. But those were more interdepartmental projects and collaborations, and I did not have students as creators in such a project. So working with students in Omeka was a first for me. So now let's see what the back end looks like and the way we incorporated it in the classroom. I think this image perfectly explains our journey from start to end with Omeka training. Because it was a slow start because we had students think about what's a collection, what's an item, and how all these put together will create a digital exhibit. So after consulting with Dr. Garr, I created a LibGuide so that students would have access to everything Omeka outside the classroom. But that proved to be a little bit too overwhelming for them. So I took a step back and I started with the basics. As I mentioned before, in the project lifecycle, we had to decide on the name of the omeka.net hosted site. And I remember, I can still remember, all of us sitting in the classroom and, students, they were so amazing. They were talking to each other, they were trying to incorporate the text in the title, and they came up with Dawn of a New Age, a digital exploration of Don Quixote. The next step was the appearance of the site. And again, because I had the Plus, we had the Plus plan, we had access to 8 themes. So I think they had some sort of a homework over the weekend, and they all logged in and they chose the theme that they thought. It was all very democratic. So, collectively they discussed the pros and cons of each theme and the overall look of the site. And they decided this theme is called Big Stuff. Then, there you go. Yeah, okay, so yeah, this is a screenshot of the of some of the things you have access in the Plus plan. So this is the theme they chose. It's called Big Stuff. After we chose the name of the site and the theme, I shared the login information with everyone before we started the training. The reason why I shared the same login with everybody, because this was a highly collaborative project. So they all had to go into the same backend, the same dashboard in order to add items and to create collections and to collaborate eventually on the creation of the portion of the digital exhibit. And I also wanted for them to get acquainted, to get to know Omeka before actually starting loading stuff, because if you have never worked with tools like that, it can be overwhelming. So I just wanted to say, this is the login, just go there, don't break it, but take a look at it. And it worked. Afterwards, I decided on the plugins that I needed for the proper functionality of the site. Of the 20 plugins, I chose very few that were really, really important. As I mentioned before, I didn't want to have everything overly complex. I didn't want to overwhelm them. So there were a few plugins that I wanted to have. So I had the exhibit builder to build rich exhibits. Another one was item order, which gave me the ability to custom order items in collections. And simple pages, allowing me to create simple web pages for the public site. So this is part of the dashboard of the exhibit site. Based on Dr. Garr's final project requirements, they had to work in groups, and they had to work on these particular pages. So this is how it looked in the back end. And then they had the option of going into each part of the exhibit, and they worked to create the exhibit. But let's take a step back, because this is very important. I learned from the beginning, I'm a metadata librarian. So for me, item description is very important. But then I realized, I said, this is not an iSchool class. This is not library science. So Omeka uses Dublin Core as the metadata standard. But I said, if I add that component to the training, I'm going to lose them. So I said, think of, you have certain elements that you have to describe the items. And I said, very important are the title and the description, and of course, rights. Because I'm going to talk about copyright afterwards, but this was very important to me to have them understand that in order for these to be used, they have to be described, but at the same time, I did not want to overwhelm them with the description. Another thing was the distinction between item and collection, and it took them some time to understand the distinction between them and why they are important in the creation of the exhibit. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but these are some sort of the visuals I used for them to understand how all fits together. So you have few collections, and in each collection you have items, and then you draw items from various collections to create digital exhibits. You might see that in talking about the description for the creator, I decided with Dr. Garr in the creator field to have the students add their names. And the reason is because we wanted to keep track and see how many students uploaded items. And this was a way for us to keep track of their involvement.
And if they had an issue with copyright, we could address it with the individual student who uploaded the item directly.
Yeah, so yeah, this is, copyright was another thing I really wanted to firmly establish from the beginning. Because, as we were talking earlier, students nowadays, they go to Google Scholar or they go to Google to find resources. The same with images. They want to Google images. And I said, no, you cannot do that. So, we had to, have a separate training on copyright, to tell them the distinction that if they are not the copyright holder, do they have the permission to, to use it? We told them that they're fine, if they want to, if they took a photo of a statue of Don Quixote in Plaza de España, let's say, yeah, they are the copyright holder and they can use that. But if they're not, they need the permission. Or if they are using, items from the public domain, they're fine. But they really have to, if there's any copyright statement or any rights, they had to add that in for the description of the item. And of course, we had, certain sites with free images. Some of them, they ask you for attribution, some of them are not. So we went through each and every one. We also had someone that found something, I think it was a book that was digitized. Anyway, it was from National Library of Spain. So he said, can I use it? I said, you know what? I speak Spanish. Let me write an email. So I wrote an email and they granted us the permission to have that particular thing used. And Dr. Garr, I think you have also an example where they use another image modified.
Yeah, there was a group of students who wanted to take a picture of the text where they had written their notes in it and use it in the thing. But of course, although Don Quixote, the Quixote text is in the public domain, the edition that they use has, of course, proprietary editing and footnotes and things like that that are copyrighted. And so instead of that, what they did was they typed the text into a word processing software, and it had like old-timey parchment looking paper behind it, made the script look really old. And so I'll show you some examples when we go through the site later. I'll show you those examples, but those are ways that the students wanted to make it look like they had a picture of the manuscript, but they didn't, obviously. They just made that happen digitally, but they created their own content. They created memes too. They had a good time doing that. So several of the students created their own memes and used those as items in their exhibit.
All right, so shall we go to the site?
Yeah, that's good. Do you want to go ahead and continue sharing and I'll tell you where to go? All right, so if you scroll down, this is our introduction. This is the home page of our website. And this was the page that we wrote, Marina and I. We had a friend of mine randomly sent me a blanket. That's the text of Don Quixote in the shape of a windmill. And so my students, we had the photo there. So we just kind of gave it an overview about the project down at the bottom of the page, and a little bit of information about how to navigate. And the way that the students set it up, you can either navigate by going to the next page at the bottom, or if you scroll up a little bit, there's a menu where people can navigate to a specific page. So I'm going to have Marina, these menu options are the pages that I set. The archaic language, inconsistencies, insanities, intertextuality, and time are the elements that each pair of students were examining throughout the text. And the reaccentuations and adaptations page was the one that was the whole class collaborative effort. Also, there was a discussion about whether to do this in English or Spanish. Normally, my students aren't allowed to use English in class. I decided to let them do this in English because, again, as a dissemination tool in the United States, I felt like that was worth doing for this first project, and also so that we could sort of put it out there for other people to look at, for teachers who want to learn to use this or to create a digital pedagogy. And of course, all of those classes were in Spanish anyway, so this was a nice break for them because they got to do it in English. Marina, if you will take us to the archaic language page, I would like to highlight that. That's a particularly good example. So these students were looking at all of the examples of archaic language in the text. And so they go through and you see that they have their items on the left. For the most part, they've given us some, these are all in the public domain with captions. And the attributions are available in the list of items in the item collection. And if you look here, they have an entire list of examples, right? Non folladas, cobardes, civiles, criaturas, and then they explain what this means and why it's archaic language. And then if you go to the bottom of this page, they tell us why this is important. So we have a lot of different examples throughout. And then she says, what's the significance of Don Quixote's use of archaic language? It's meant to emphasize his dedication to the embodiment of a knight errant and emphasizes the difference between Don Quixote and the other characters. And then they talk about how the use of archaic language changes over time throughout the text. So this was a really, really good, really well-used evidence from the text in this particular case. If you'll scroll back up, Marina, let's look at the, I believe it's the inconsistencies page. Scroll down. So this group of students was looking where the text is inconsistent. There are moments, for example, where one character is called a name and then later on the character is called by a different name. And the kids were sort of playing with what to do with that. I mean, do we just assume that Cervantes was like too tired after writing his 1,000-page book to remember the name of Sancho Panza's wife? Is he messing with us? And so what they did was they tracked all of them, and then they gathered 3 groups of types of inconsistencies. So we have the ones that have to deal with chapter 10 of part 2, where the donkeys are named a million different things. A little further down, they have all of the inconsistencies related to time, where the text tells us how much time has passed, and then a character tells us it's a totally different amount of time. Inconsistencies with names. And next to the name inconsistency, this is what I was talking about earlier, where the students actually typed out some of the text on a parchment looking piece of paper so that they could use the text that's in the public domain, but they weren't using anything that was proprietary. If you'll scroll down a little bit more, this is one of the memes. Because one point in the text, Sancho's wife is named Juana, and then later in the text, her name is Teresa. So they made a meme of that. So these are the ways that the students were being very creative in terms of the way that they kind of got around copyright, not in a bad way, but like, you know, when they had limitations. If you'll scroll back up, oh, there's another one.
Wait.
Oh, no, that's fine. If you want to go to the re-accentuations and adaptations page, please.
Yep.
This is the part of the project that was the full class collaboration. And this was, we had them sit down and work on this for at least one full class period. At the end, once they had collected all of the re-accentuations and adaptations, then they had to figure out how to put them together and how to organize them. At the beginning, they have given us several re-accentuations and adaptations that are of the book in general. And if you scroll down, they get down and they start talking by section. So here then we have where it says part 1, prologue to chapter 22. This is a section. So some of the students were looking at this particular piece and certain re-accentuations that have to do with specifically that part of the novel, right? So of course the windmill scene is chapter 8 in part 1. So there's, billions of those, and chapter 17 and even lesser known things. They're tying things to the Lord of the Rings, for example. And that was really interesting. This was possibly, I think, the most difficult piece, and we'll talk about that. But I think overall, if you'll keep scrolling down, Marina, we have a very text heavy thing. So they focused a lot more, the students in general did, about describing. We had some copyright things because a lot of the pop culture stuff that they were wanting to refer to is under copyrights. They can't really use the images. And so this was the most challenging, I think, to put together. But the content here is just spot on. I mean, they've done so much really great work with the type of ways that Don Quixote has been appropriated by many, many other cultures throughout time. and re-accentuated. Is there anything else that you want to show them particularly about the site, Marina?
I no, just wanted to, go through, each and every one.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this one, the students were looking at the ways in which Don Quixote was insane, or whether he was insane. That was a question we had, because there's sort of times in the book when he obviously seems insane, but there are other times when he's very, very lucid and he says things like, "I know who I am," and he actually appears to. And so this group of students gives some examples of where the insanity in Don Quixote himself is ambiguous, right? And so they talk about the Cave of Montesinos adventure. They talk about the wagoner and the lions, and Don Quixote being a lion because he was caged in the first half. And then they talk about the Duke and the Duchess. Then instead of Don Quixote creating things for himself, the second part of the book is it's often about other people creating things and imposing them on Don Quixote's vision instead of Don Quixote coming up with those things on his own. And that's the conclusion that they come to, that this group of students comes to, is that over the course of the novel, the insanity sort of doesn't reside really in Don Quixote at all. It's more like other people in the end are trying to sort of push him into that box.
And I think time is
yeah.
Mhm.
And then in the time one, they were looking at again the ways in which time may or may not be inconsistent in the text. Some of this had overlap, which was really interesting because time is one of the inconsistencies. But then they're looking at time. For example, there was a 10-year gap in the publications between part 1 and part 2. They looked at the length of the journey, how long it said that Don Quixote had been out versus how long it seems in the text. They talked about how the time references are frequently referring to biblical events. When we have, 3 days for this or 3 days for that. For that, they used photographs of Bible texts. And they compared with the Don Quixote. That was interesting to note because, of course, at the time Don Quixote was published, it was illegal in the Spanish Inquisition, of course, to translate the Bible into Vulgate languages. So Cervantes actually uses biblical language a lot and quotes from the Bible a lot in the story, but as part of the story. So it's sort of passing on the Bible in Spanish, even though you're not really allowed to do that. So it's sort of a spit in the eye to the Inquisition. And the students noted that here as well. Do you want to show them the intertextuality page? I don't think we got that one
Yes.
yet. And then this group of students, this pair of students was looking at references in Don Quixote to other books and other texts. So they look really closely at chapter 6 of book 1, which is when Don Quixote's friends and family burn his library. It was interesting seeing which books they saved and which books they burned. This is an entire chapter full of intertextuality. So they talked about why they burned things, which ones they didn't burn and why. Then they looked at part 2 of the novel, every time that they referred in part 2 to part 1 of the novel. And then they looked at references to the Bible specifically. So again, they had tracked, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of data over the course of the whole novel, over the course of the semester. And so what they had to do here was sort of make sense of all the data that they collected. So they had marked every time in the book that another book was referred to, and then they had to figure out, well, what do we do with all this data? How do I communicate? What does it mean? What's important about this data? How am I going to communicate that with someone else? And I think they've done, I mean, maybe that's, me being really proud of my students, but I think they've done a really good job here, and they provided a lot of really useful information for anyone who's teaching or approaching Don Quixote as a novel. So let's go on to the next slide. And I'm going to talk a little bit right now about the pedagogical challenges that we faced doing this. One thing was that the students had a really hard time conceiving of the project multidimensionally, right? It was like, what's an item? What's a collection? How do I turn this text and all these textual data into a hyperlinked digital media artifact or exhibit? And then we also had it was challenging to do the whole group collaboration piece because there were 11 people. And also there was an issue of time. I mean, we read the entire novel in one semester in an undergraduate. Yeah, it was very ambitious and they did it. But I mean, it means that, you have to limit when we're talking about the days of class time that we're using to do training, the days of classroom time that we're using to do collaboration and stuff. It certainly, we had a time limit that was difficult to overcome. The students needed a lot more training with Omeka than I thought they would. That back end stuff that Marina was showing you was not, it's easy to do, but it's not intuitive. So you do have to have the information. And then once you get to do it, it's really easy to do. But it did take a lot of figuring out how to train them to do it. And I think the next time I would give more, I didn't give them deadlines for when they needed to have items uploaded throughout the semester. So there was a whole lot of them collecting the textual data, and then the item thing was all at the end. And then there was a whole lot of things that had to be organized at that point where we might have spaced that out to sort of force them to do the mental work of conceiving the project earlier. So those are some of the pedagogical challenges. Marina's going to talk to us now about some of the technical challenges that we faced.
Yeah, as Dr. Garr said, definitely, more training on Omeka, and also going forward, when we're going to use this tool for our next, for Dr. Garr's next classes, I really realized that, having, a LibGuide or, having a video, it doesn't cut. They need someone there to train them. So, and again, how do you balance that with the, class time, teaching, and then me training? So, yeah, with that being said, also as Dr. Garr said, there was a more of a conceptual difficulty, between, what's an item and what's a collection. So, we're drawing a lot of, examples from museums. Let's say, you have pictures and they are part of a collection, and then you have an exhibit. So, trying to draw from, outside examples to have them and grasp that specific concept of you need items that are part of a collection that will be used in exhibit. Another thing, a technical challenge was, being able to, have a balance between, how do you teach students about metadata description? It's hard, especially because I'm a metadata librarian. I just wanted to make sure that, I'm not too hard on them, but, the quality should also, it's important because it's public, it's on the site, on the, wide web. So there had to be a give and take, Then again, with the dashboard, having one login for everybody, there's always the risk of things going bad. So I was always worried that things may disappear or settings may be changed. But I think, we had a tremendous group of students. They were so, once they passed that, bump with, oh my gosh, what's Dublin Core and why do I have to use that? Towards that, oh, we can do this, I like that tool. So they were, as you saw in the pages of the exhibit, they did, use some functionalities and to have the pages a little bit different from another. So yeah, that's from the technical challenges. So now we're going to talk about some future plans.
Yeah, so based on the challenges that we just outlined, we're looking at what we're going to do for the next project. And the end goal here is to sort of create a pedagogy of creating digital exhibits in the classroom. Like, how does this work? Why is it beneficial? What's the benefit to the students, and what are the best practices, so that we can share that with other people. I think pedagogically, I'm looking at more deadlines for creating and archiving items and creating collections. I'm looking at scheduling more whole class collaborative time as just I think that will make the entire creation process a little bit smoother. Also, with my rubric, making my outcomes just a little bit more defined now that I have a sense of how the students interact with the tool. Although I still will not define them, I'm still going to keep them very broad because I don't want to limit the students' imagination either. So once they get this idea what an item and what a collection is and how to put them together and how to organize the information, in terms of the outcome, the product, the end product, I really would like them to think the sky's the limit here because they do really surprise us with the things that they did. I mean, even this was, and I might give them ideas of how to create visually exciting representations using the tool. I really like that the students sort of had a very standardized look to theirs. That was sort of purposeful when they started talking about their whole class collaborations and we started seeing how some groups were organizing their pages. Everyone sort of gravitated toward that similar way so that everything was very standard in terms of navigating the exhibit, which I liked. And that was not something that Marina and I prompted them to do. That was something that they sort of did on their own, which I really appreciated. And then finally, the question that I have moving into other projects is what can this tool do that we haven't even dreamed of yet, right? I want to get the kids playing with it earlier and more often, perhaps having more like low stakes exhibit mini projects so they can try it out and see what happens in a low stakes environment so that when they create their big project, they can come together and say, well, I made a mini project where I had, you know, a flying dolphin all the way across the screen every 5 seconds. And they'll be like, ooh, I want to do that, you know? And so they kind of get those ideas from each other based on the mini projects that they do. Of course, here for us, funding is an issue because of course, Omeka is not a free tool. So our school very generously does for our QEP has offered mini grants that we can apply for future projects. But I mean, this is definitely something that might be a grant need to continue and develop at a larger scale.
In terms of me, you know, from the technical side, I'm, you know, playing with the idea of, you know, if the QEP grant, it's you know, it's not a possibility. There is an option of hosting locally Omeka, so that is something that I'm working on, so that you know I have more flexibility onto you know what I want the functionality of the future sites to be. Then I plan on starting early with the training and have a lot of visual examples, because diving into the dashboard can be really overwhelming. I can only imagine, you know, the first thing they thought, oh my gosh, I have to learn this now on top of my assignment in the project. So,
and in Spanish, which most of my students are not native speakers.
Yeah. So, you know, there are a lot of things, you know, I can do, you know, on my side, you know, from the library. And it's, you know, something I'm really working, and I'm going to work with the IT here to see, you know, what we can do to host this, to host Omeka, so that we have a better flexibility in terms of all the functions we can use. Well, I guess, you know, honestly, our hope is that in this, you know, rapidly changing technical world, this project will serve as a model for other academic institutions that would, you know, engage students with digital humanities tools. So just wanted to mention that although this project was designed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, using Omeka in the classroom may be of particular benefit to students learning remotely. So with that, we wanted to Thank you. And we're open to questions and ideas if you have.
And you have our contact information on the next slide too.
These are a little, some resources, and I'm going to share the slides. I'm going to send you the PowerPoint, and this is our, contact information. But would love to hear from you if anybody's from an academic institution, if they may have been inspired or thought of using or used other tools or any other type of questions that you have.
Yeah, we're also using in current projects, we're using another tool called story maps. So that's definitely something else that we're working on as well. So if you're interested in hearing about that, we're certainly willing to talk about it. Thank you.